Okay, so this is the latest generation Stella, the Stella FK, Shimano's flagship spinning reel. You will see all these reels in action later, but first let's take a look at Shimano's website, just so we know what we're dealing with here. Here's the Stella page, and let's scroll through some of the relevant new tech they put into this reel. Shimano has always dominated the line management game, and it's no surprise that the biggest mechanical change they made for the new Stella involved the oscillation speed, what they call infinity loop, which is a super slow spool oscillation that results in a very parallel line lay. The other thing they added is a little fin that tucks loose braid against the line roller, oddly named the anti-twist fin, since what this prevents are loops in your stack line that often turns into a wind knot on your subsequent cast. Now both of those features work well in my experience, but the improvement Shimano made that had the most impact on my fishing is their new Duracross drag. I'll come back to this in great detail later on, but for now, let's just say that Shimano has finally caught up to Daiwa when it comes to smooth drag performance at very low drag settings. Okay, a brief look at the Vanquish page. The Vanquish is nearly interchangeable with the Stella. Same magnesium frame, same gearing improvements, infinity loop, shark fin, Duracross drag, with one significant difference, the rotor. The point of the Vanquish is to have the lightest reel possible while retaining a metal alloy body for stiffness. To that end, we have the MGO3 rotor, which is Shimano's lightest rotor design on any reel. This translates to very light startup inertia, and it really highlights the interesting design philosophy behind the Stella. Stellas use a heavy aluminum rotor instead of CI4 or magnesium. Hence, if you look at the overall weight of Stellas, they are not light reels, and they do not have that feather-light startup people are used to in even downstream models like the Vanford. Shimano designed the Stella to have a particular winding feel, one that is heavy, solid, and incredibly refined. It really is the most unique rotational feel you'll get from any spinning reel on the market. I bought the Stella first. This is the JDM 3000 MHG model, and immediately fell in love with the reel. I found the slow oscillation mesmerizing in action, and you can probably shave with the edge of that line lay. The winding experience when you turn the handle is something I've never felt before. The closest reel I can compare it to is probably the Daiwa Certate, which is basically an aluminum-bodied exist. But the Stella is yet more refined in a different way that's hard to explain unless you try one for yourself. So here's my first fish on the Stella, on a crankbait, something I don't normally use a spinning reel for, but I wanted to test how the reel did when throwing baits with some water resistance. I still prefer a baitcaster for cranking, but the power of the Stella gearing was very obvious after burning a crankbait all day. Now of course its primary purpose was catching flounder all summer long, and the Stella stays smooth and refined in the salt. Obviously, it had rock solid performance on big hook sets. So halfway through that season, I bought the new Vanquish, mainly because I wanted to match a lighter reel to my Steve 76 AGS. And I must admit, it was among the least exciting reel purchases I've made. I find the reel aesthetically unpleasing, and out of the box it was so light that it reminded me of my Vanfords more than anything else. I remained unenthused about the Vanquish until the moment I used it to set the hook into a decent fish. Now after that I realized comparisons to the Vanford was grossly unfair. While the Vanford is a great reel, and I highly recommend it for the kind of fishing I do, it's built on a composite frame. And though Shimano does a great job with their CI4 Plus material, when you set the hook hard on a fish, things shift on a Vanford. I don't mean the stem flexes, but the entire frame gives a tiny bit on big hook sets, and it's something I never quite pinned down until I used the Vanquish. The Vanquish, in stark contrast, doesn't budge a nanometer on hook sets. It remains rock solid as you'd expect from a metal-bodied reel, but is nonetheless shocking considering its feather-light weight and startup inertia. Now, I would expect the same rigidity in the Exist, though I've never used mine in the Salt, but that's something we'll get to later in this review. For now, a couple more hook sets on the Vanquish, and this next one is pretty funny. So yeah, I thought that was a rock, but it's obviously not. And by the way, I'm running 12-pound fluoro leader, and as you can see, my strike drag setting is set pretty high. And there she is, a stargazer, one of my favorites, and the Vanquish popped her out of the sand with no issue. Thing looks like a Muppet. In any case, the next few clips will deal with the drag. And remember, it's the same drag on the Stella as well. First off, a hook set of doom. It's not that big. Can't be that big.
You think you can land it?
I think so. Yeah, not a chance. What the? Dude. Yeah, not a chance. Do you see the size of that thing? Yeah.
I think that was, I'm not sure if that was it or if that was like some sanded.
Yeah. I let that clip run a while so you get a sense of how much abuse the drag took. We're really going to put Shimano's claim of 10 times more durability on the new Duracross drag to the test. Alright, so here's a much smaller ray that I managed to land after about 15 minutes. The reason I'm showing these clips is this. Normally, after a fight with one of these cownose rays, the felt drag washers in your reel is pretty much shot. It could still do the job until the fibers completely melt away, but you lose any smoothness that is inherent in properly oiled felt drag washers. That's why in high drag settings, carbon fiber washers are used. But the downside to carbon fiber is they slip at lower drag settings. Their purpose is to dissipate heat under tremendous loads, not smoothly pay out line to protect your 5-pound fluoro during a prolonged fight with medium-sized fish. Shimano's felt drag washers, even in their previous generation Stellas, were always one step behind Daiwa's flagship reels. There was always a weird little stickiness upon startup with Shimano drag systems. And this isn't a problem until you start breaking off on very light line. As you'll see in a minute, Shimano has solved this problem with the new Duracross drag. So this one's a baby, unlike whatever demonic ray I was attached to earlier. In any case, thousands of Fluke and a couple more cownose rays later, I take the Vanquish to the lake. Did not touch the drag, did not even open up the drag stack to take a peek. Just spooled up with PE 0.6 braid and 5-pound fluoroleader and went to work on my big smallies. Oh. Absolutely flawless drag. And by the way, that's the only practical purpose of dropping $600, $700, $800 on a spinning reel. It's for that buttery smooth drag when you're finesse fishing with light line. At the other end of the spectrum, the Stellas and Saltigas SWs are there to pump out 20, 30, 40 pounds of back-breaking drag pressure. There, you're spending over $1,000 on the reel for its design, build quality, tolerances, and the guarantee that the thing won't explode in your face as you fight that tuna or GT to a standstill. If I subjected any other reel with traditional felt drag washers to the same abuse, that includes Shimano's and Daiwa's, I would have broken off this 5-pound fluoro I'm using on the first hook set, guaranteed. I know this because I've done it before and learned my lesson. I still have different size OEM felt drag washers for nearly all the spinning reels I own, and not just to replace after unexpected battles with rays and sharks. I found myself swapping them out every year just to be safe. But as you can see, Shimano figured this out. The durability of carbon fiber, but the smoothness at low drag pressures of felt. It's certainly one feature on the new Stella and Vanquish that is decidedly not a gimmick. So this Smalley isn't budging and is fighting me to a draw. The thing with having confidence in your drag isn't just about its inherent smoothness. It lets you apply maximum pressure on the fish with your rod without feeling the need to bow your rod tip at the fish every time it surges. You can confidently maintain that smooth, even pressure, and as a result, you lose far fewer fish, and you land them as quickly as your line size allows. Alright, as I fight this psychotic salmon, you might be wondering where the Stella went in this review. The Stella made a great pairing with my Labrax AGS, which is a 9-foot rod. Heavier reels tend to balance out longer or heavier rods better. But picking up my Skis and Vanquish combo seemed more and more natural as the season wore on. And while I liked the idea of the Stella and enjoyed more pride and ownership than I do with the Vanquish, I found myself leaving the Stella at home more and more often. I realized after spending some time with the Vanquish, for the fishing I do and the medium-sized species I target, that reel was ticking every box. Now, I'm sure if I had a reason to use small 25 or 3,000 size reels to target bigger fish on a regular basis, say fish between 10 and 30 pounds, then the heavy aluminum rotor of the Stella would impart tremendous advantage under load. Drag performance isn't just about the drag washer material or grease. It's how the spool is supported and how little flex a rotor has to keep that line coming off the line roller smoothly. But like I said, those are not the parameters under which I fish. I live in that middle earth zone of 3 to 10 pound fish as my various targeted species. And if a massive bycatch comes along, then the Vanquish can handle it without too much complaining, as we saw on the previous clips. As much as I wanted to fish with the Stella instead of using it as an $800 fidget spinner at home, the Vanquish simply did the job better for me at a cheaper price point and a much lighter package. Now let's talk about Daiwa for a moment. The Exist, Arity, and Surtace are probably the most refined spinning reels ever made. Certainly the most beautiful reels ever made. The Daiwa monocoque design is just absolutely gorgeous. It's sort of like a reel from the future. And I caught some of my most memorable fish on these reels. But sadly, these days my spinning reels have to cross over between fresh and salt water. And to be brutally honest, I no longer trust Daiwa's mag-sealed reels in salt water, especially not the sandy salt water that's around on the open beach. Now, some of you might disagree with my assessment, and that's fine, but know that I take care of my gear to an almost pathological degree, and I've had zero issues with Shimano's X-Protect system of keeping water out, whereas my experience with Daiwa and the experience of those around me who I trust has not been great. Let's just leave it at that. I will still buy high-end Daiwa spinning reels in the future. Though Shimano has closed the gap with their Duracross drag, Daiwa's drag system is still a smidge smoother to start up at low settings, and my Exist and Surtace live happily as freshwater-only reels. Okay, back to Shimano and the salmon who won't quit. As you guys know, the Vanquish is a JDM only model. And that means if you buy one, you'll receive zero service, parts, or warranty support from Shimano USA. If you're someone who can service your own spinning reels, then it's no big deal. But if you're like the vast majority of us who tremble at the thought of tiny springs and clips flying across the room when you take off the side plate, it's something to consider. You can find independent shops or techs to service your JDM reels, or you can send it back to Japan on your own dime. In that vein, I don't know what Shimano USA was thinking bringing over the X-Sense over the Vanquish. The X-Sense is a weird sea bass only model in Japan. It has a carbon fiber drag stack and it confuses freshwater bass guys who buy them here and wonder why their $500 reel is breaking off 8-pound fluoro left and right. If Shimano USA is watching this, get rid of the X-Sense. I know you're not selling that many. Give us the Vanquish. That's the reel we need and deserve. In any case, a last look at the Stella. And here I'm using it as Shimano intended, for a constant winding retrieve and not a quote stop and go retrieve like jigging where you're only picking up slack line with the reel. It certainly feels very nice spinning the handle on the Stella with that very heavy rotor and super balanced oscillation. But that's not quite enough to tip the scales for me after using the Vanquish side by side for a full season. The Vanquish is the real counterpart and answer to the Exist. Both are feather light, magnesium frame reels sporting super smooth drags. But only the Vanquish is saltwater ready in my opinion. The Stella, on the other hand, with its weight and heavy rotor, is really the outlier among high-end bass fishing reels, almost a specialty reel in my mind. Fans of the Vanquish never own just one Vanquish. They end up with a whole tribe of them. I know a couple people who have every model they offer. And now I get it. The 2023 Vanquish is really the most well-rounded and functional spinning reel I've ever used. But ultimately, if you like nice things, I don't think you'll regret owning any of the reels mentioned in this review, with the exception of the accents. Do not buy the accents for any reason. Okay, I hope you guys found this helpful. This review was a bear to put together. I know I left out a lot of pertinent details, but any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.